Well, obviously, we should congratulate the right on Liz Truss on becoming Prime Minister, and we'll just have to hope and pray that she does the right things as Prime Minister and leader of the Conservative Party. What we had today with her statement outside 10 Downing Street is basically not really much. It was just an aspirational or an attempt at an aspirational type speech, I think, aimed to assure particularly her followers, a lot of Conservative MPs there to welcome her, but also to assure the country that she had a message to give. She had some policies which she'd got planned, and she was going to tackle one or two key issues, the key one being the energy one. I think the big surprise really was that she didn't actually give any specifics at all about how she's going to tackle the energy crisis. And I think a number of people were expecting at least a little bit more than nothing. But I think we will get something over the next 2 or 3 days. Obviously, some people sort of think that there will be a freeze on all energy bills, and that would cost an absolute fortune, between £1 and £200 billion envisaged for the next 18 months. But we don't know what is going to be planned, and we can't say anything until then. But the point is, even if she did do that, that would just add to the national debt, and we've already got a huge national debt after the mismanagement of the COVID crisis. Because as you know, we spent over 400 billion on that. Most of that was a waste of money, and the problem with when you keep on spending money which you're not getting in through taxation and so on, you're increasing the borrowing, increasing inflation, and what we have seen is an increase in interest rates as well. Her message has been delivery, 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 and it reminded me of Tony Blair's message when he said education, education, education. And what happened with education? Not really very much. And I suspect what Liz Truss is going to have is a big problem with delivery, because she seems to want to do everything, and it's not possible without borrowing more and more and more money, because she also said that she wanted to cut taxes. There's a fear that this is going to be beneficial to the more well-off and to companies rather than people who would really need to have cuts in taxes. And of course, there's a huge number of people who are not paying taxes anyway, who desperately need help with energy bills. Now, one of the problems with what she said today she mentioned sort of the words delivery, 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 and a bit of a soundbite in a way, but it did remind me of when the former Prime Minister Tony Blair said education, education, education as sort of key issues which needed to be addressed. And of course, not much was done with education. And I think Liz Truss is going to have a huge problem with delivery, because she's asking for everything to be done at once, which require overcoming sort of mission impossible, basically. This is the Conservatives have 12 years to achieve things, and they still haven't achieved them. And I think one thing Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, was right on, is he said what we need is a change of government. And certainly the Conservatives have had plenty of opportunity to improve a lot of issues in the UK, and they haven't. But if you go back, I mean, first of all, Liz Truss did what one would normally do when one was taking over as Prime Minister and give a little bit of a tribute to your predecessor. But it was interesting that the three tributes she gave to former Prime Minister Boris Johnson were that he'd successfully delivered the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, that he'd been very strong on Ukraine, and basically, if you look at those issues, first of all, this whole decision to spend an absolute fortune, literally billions and billions, on the COVID vaccine is going to turn out to be a complete waste of money. And over the coming months, I think that's going to be shown to be a completely wasted policy. And the decision regarding Ukraine, we've already seen the consequences of that in terms of energy prices, cost of living, and so on. But the other thing she said he delivered on was Brexit. Now, we all know that we've had a sort of 75% Brexit, but we've got this crazy situation in Northern Ireland where they're in but not in sort of thing. And that could be an achievement for her if she actually resolves that issue. But Boris Johnson actually did a bodge job with Brexit, and that is the truth. And I think some people were saying, oh, well, Liz Truss is trying to be truthful with the nation, but I honestly don't think she was, because you only have to look at the Ukraine situation. It was totally blamed on President Putin in Russia. Now, if you're honest, you would say we had our part to play in peace in the Ukraine, because it's been revealed by more than one or two sources that Boris Johnson, back in April, actually scuppered the peace deal which was going to be signed between Russia and Ukraine, and offered billions to the Zelensky government. So let's have some honesty, and this honesty about saying, well, Britain's security is bound up by having security in the world, is what this is what Liz Truss said. Well, if that's the case, why did her government abandon 26 million people in Afghanistan to the extremist Taliban? It's just complete hypocrisy. But if you want to have security in the world, there was no security threat to the United Kingdom with the Russian conflict with Ukraine. Absolutely none at all. No threat to us. And to say we are trying to defend democracy when the Ukraine is as democratic as Russia is, and the Ukraine has not got a free media. They lock up people who disagree with them. They've got compulsory conscription. They don't allow people to oppose their point of view in the war. So if we're talking about values and so on, surely British values should be about promoting peace and goodwill and security and harmony in the world. And if we were honest, we would say, look, we're going to put our hands up and admit we have prolonged this war and we need to change our tack. And as you know, Simon, we've got a petition out there to request the UK government to change their policy to become an independent, neutral peacemaker in Ukraine. And I'd ask as many people as possible to sign this, because we need to put pressure on this new government of Liz Truss, because the soundings are that they're going to continue to give. Yeah, so that you've taken the words out of my own mouth, Simon, because I thought it was a pretty good speech. It did try to be aspirational, but when you analysed it in detail, it was empty words. I think for far too long the Conservative Party have been saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I mean, look at what we had from Priti Patel on immigration, and the reverse happened, and thank goodness she's resigned. But I think the public have fed up with empty words. They want delivery, and ironically, Liz Truss said she's going to focus on delivery, 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 yet she's carrying on with the same, terrible policies. And if she's going to carry on giving British public money to the Zelensky government in the Ukraine, if she's going to carry on giving arms for people to be killed, and this is, this relates to Ukrainians and Russians, then it's actually a very immoral and act to get involved with. And it does need to be questioned. And the thing is, obviously, Unity News is one of the few free media which is, questioning why should the United Kingdom be involved in the Ukraine. And, in the wider public across the country, there's a sort of no proper debate on this Ukrainian issue, yet it's caused a catastrophe as major as the costs of the COVID have. And it's certainly, if it hasn't got there now, it will do, because people are already talking about business and people having the same sort of support that they had during the COVID crisis. And if you think that just freezing the energy prices for 18 months was going to be 100 to 200 billion pounds, what about all the other costs? The cost of living, everything else which is affected, is going to cost so much more. And, what we should be saying to this government is, have you costed the consequences of your Ukraine policy? And I would say, even if it was a justified policy, even if our freedom was really at stake, one would still logically have to look at the cost factor. We started this conflict sort of thinking, well, the government spent more money on Ukraine than they have on, as we know, they reduced the rail and transport budgets by over 4 billion, which if that money had still been in the budget, we wouldn't have had the rail and tube strikes. But that 4 or 5 billion is nothing compared to the greater costs to the whole economy of this conflict. And you have to look at what's happening elsewhere in the world. You've had South Korea and Japan just signing up for energy deals for Russia. And why are we not having a public debate about the fact that the only countries who are sanctioning Russia are a number of countries in the EU, uh, some NATO countries, the USA and the UK, and one or two in the Far East, but the majority of countries in the world, being that's 7/8 of the population of the world, are not sanctioning Russia, and they're trading with them. And our government is in an untenable position, and the new Prime Minister Liz Truss has got an opportunity to review this Ukraine policy, and it's actually her duty to do so, because her first duty is to this country and its people. Her first duty is not to the Ukraine or indeed any other country in the world. And we would just have to hope that the Labour Party starts questioning her on this Ukraine policy, and the Lib Dems as well, because up until now they've been going along with this policy, and it's been disastrous for the public, and there's been total dishonesty about this UK involvement in Ukraine right from the beginning. And if Liz Truss wants to have a period of Prime Minister of being honest, then she's got to start being honest and open up the debate on this issue. And we've had this involvement in the Ukraine now for 7 months now, and not once have the British public been asked for their consent for an involvement, which has gone past that of a proxy war. It's become like we are at war without declaring war. And there just has to be a referendum on this issue, because people shouldn't be asked to suffer. We shouldn't have this damage to our economy, and without people having the consent. Otherwise, we've got no democracy at all. So, one of the key weapons we can use is a parliamentary petition, and we really must get that petition out there and signed, and demand that it's not no platform by the media, because what seems to happen is that the control the government managed to achieve over the bulk of the mainstream media during the COVID crisis, they haven't relinquished that control. And I think it's very sad when you see that all the media are singing from the same hymn sheet. None of them are allowing any discussion on this issue, and it's just not acceptable at all. If you go back to Liz Truss's aspirations, some of the other ones, well, of course we want the NHS to be much better and GP appointments to be much better. But the evidence is, as a result of this involvement in the Ukraine conflict, that there's been a holding back of government funds because they're needed elsewhere. So we've had hospitals like the St Helier one in Surrey put on hold. We've had many projects put on hold because the money has been allocated for things like Ukraine. And what we've got to do is have a UK first Prime Minister, not a Ukraine first Prime Minister. And it's early days now. She's got the opportunity, but if she wants to come across as a Boris Johnson version 2, then the way things are going at the moment, that's the way the impression she's going to create. Um, I think if the Conservatives have got any sense at all, they would hold off having an election for as long as possible, because as we speak, Liz Truss has got very poor rating with the public, and it's way below even Keir Starmer. But I suppose if the powers that be know that the situation will be even worse in, say, a year's time, maybe they might try and have an election. But I think the opposition parties have got to be very careful, because they fell for this one before and they lost out rather badly. And I think we'll just have to see. But I think certainly there are people in Liz Truss's own team who've already started stabbing her in the back. And on the other hand, you've got former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who said we should all get behind Liz Truss. And normally in a political party, people do back their leader, at least for some time, at least give them a chance. But I suspect that if something controversial comes up before Parliament, and if it's something which is going to favour the more well-off more rather than the people who are already suffering at the moment, it will definitely have the other parties voting against it. But the crucial thing is you could get a number of Conservatives either abstaining or voting against. So anything which has to be decided by Parliament, I think we'll have to see what happens. But what I personally favour is Liz Truss actually having discussions with the leaders of the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party, and having a joint approach to the energy and cost of living crisis. But I think it's very difficult to say, because if something, if she has some proposal before Parliament and they get rejected, then she might have to resign. But otherwise, I would say she would have at least 6 to 12 months, because at the end of the day, the Conservative Party are very sort of rigorous on having a leader who can get them victory in an election. And if they feel that Liz Truss is not the one to deliver an election victory, then she will have to go. And I think one of the key things is who she will choose in her cabinet. And we've had rumours, strong rumours, that Theresa Coffey, who was a very close friend of Liz Truss over school and supported her in this leadership campaign, she's somebody who has not got a very high record of good public opinion at the moment, and is not seen as somebody who's very friendly to people who are not that well off. And if she's going to choose somebody like her to be Secretary of State for Health, and she is apparently cigar smoking, so that would be a bit of a ruse if that was the case. But there have even been suggestions she might even be Deputy Prime Minister. I would say that Liz Truss really needs to think very clearly about having a good, broad-based team on the cabinet. But we'll have to see. I think if her cabinet is not up to delivering, then the whole situation could be very short-lived. Normally, leaders are given 100 days or so, but I suspect it might be less than that for her. But to be fair, miracles can happen, and she might not be as bad as people actually think she may be. So we just don't know. But I said quite a while back that the problem the Conservative Party had was they brought in these new rules that 20 named MPs had to be prepared to nominate a contender for the leadership election. And what that meant was that some of the newer MPs, who perhaps had a lot of potential, just couldn't get those 20 nominations because MPs were committed to other candidates. So we never really saw a good selection of young blood and new blood, and the Conservative Party got 360 odd MPs, they got thousands of councillors. To be fair, they have got some higher quality politicians, but it ended up the leadership election being a bit of a disappointment in terms of the calibre of people. But I must qualify that. Must be fair. Could be proved wrong. But all I can say is all the things which have come out of the Liz Truss camp so far lead me to think that she really doesn't think through the consequences of her policies, and if that happens, then it's not going to be good for the country. But it could well be that she has some good advisors, but if Boris Johnson had good advisors, what good did that do him when he was Prime Minister? And the other factor is, unfortunately, a number of our Prime Ministers and key politicians are allied to what is called the globalist cause, which is basically globalist vested interests, and that comes before the interests of the British public. And at the moment, Liz Truss has very strong globalist connections. If she can prove that her loyalty is to our great United Kingdom rather than these globalist vested interests, then that is absolutely great. But in order to do that, she'd have to change the UK policy on Ukraine for starters, because that is very much one where globalist vested interests work, and she'd also have to change the policy on the COVID-19 vaccine roll-up, which is very much related to the influence of major pharmaceutical companies who produce these vaccines, which, to be honest, most people don't need. What I don't see, Simon, is I don't see any new ideas, and sometimes with a new Prime Minister, you like them to come across with some new ideas. And to be fair to David Cameron, he did have some new ideas. Everyone remember the localism idea and all this sort of thing. Admittedly, I mean, some of these new ideas came from working with the Liberal Democrats, but we don't see anything new. Like, the facts are, if you scrapped business rates, for instance, it would be about 23 billion. But why not do that? I mean, the Labour Party were saying halve those rates, and why not scrap rates altogether? It wouldn't be that much more to do it, because when you look at the government being prepared to consider 100 to 200 billion on freezing the energy bills, which is government money, which could be spent better elsewhere. Um, why not do something radical which is really helpful to people? There's so many other things which could be done, but you know, um, I mean, I can give another sort of fairly interesting one. It was costing us 1 billion a year to be in Afghanistan. It's costing us at the moment, just in terms of the financial input directly into Ukraine, 5 billion after 8 months. The facts of the matter are the Taliban have broken the deal which was made with former President Trump. So there's every reason to go back into Afghanistan and liberate the Afghan people from all the terrorist, the terrible fundamentalism we're having to put up with. Now, nobody's suggesting that because the government wants to be involved in Ukraine, which you haven't got the same liberty issues at stake there at all. But we live in a world where certain people set an agenda, and some issues you're allowed to talk about, and some you're not. And as you know, Simon, at ENC News, we try and discuss all issues in a fair and impartial manner, and we try and look at what's in the best interests of people in this country and our country itself. But also, I mean, we're not selfish. We do look at what is interest of the people in the world. And going back to the Ukraine, the facts of the matter are that if the Ukraine conflict ended in a peaceful settlement now, thousands of lives would be saved, thousands of buildings wouldn't be disrupted, they'd be easier to rebuild that country. But our government at the moment is hell bent on continuing with this destruction in Ukraine. And, part of that is an absolute set of lies because the British public are not being told the truth of what is actually going on there. If Liz Truss wants to be seen as an honest Prime Minister, there should be honesty on every single issue. And as you know, on the 19th of September, there's going to be a petition debated in Parliament to open a public inquiry into COVID-19 vaccine safety. Now, if the government was interested in honesty and transparency, they'd say, right, we've dropped our opposition to having this public inquiry into COVID-19 vaccine safety. We're going to open it because we are not afraid of this evidence coming to light. It's in the public interest to do so. Now, we all know we got behind this petition, it was successful, and it will be debated. But we also know that the public inquiry into the COVID-19 conduct by the government has specifically excluded how they dealt with the COVID-19 vaccines and whether they're safe or not and so on. So, here's an example of being honest with the people. If Liz Truss wants to stop the cover-ups which are going on in so many areas, she should declare, because she did use the word freedom in her speech, she should declare that the government is going to be an open book and is not going to try and hide things and is not going to try and protect itself. And one of the problems with a government in power is it has got the ability to protect itself, and it shouldn't have that ability. If we've got people with proper integrity in power, they will ensure that there is proper transparency. So Yes, I think that would be a good idea, Simon. Very much look forward to that. And let's hope we can be optimistic. It very much looks at the moment is that we've had a cabinet with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, part two. We just got going to have a slightly different cabinet, different Prime Minister, but everything exactly the same. And just a different presentation. So what we want is the interests of the British people put first for once. All the best, Simon. Thanks.